said unto me,
Yes.
let us go into the house of the Lord.
Yes.
Hallelujah.
Yes. Yes.
Well, I got Pastor Vance's permission. He was right smack dab in the middle of a 5-week sermon series. And I ask you, please, sir, if you would let me have the privilege of being able to preach on our 14th anniversary, and he granted me that request. And so session 3 of his 5-part series will return next Sunday.
Yes, sir. Amen.
But I wanted to speak today on the occasion of our 14th anniversary. 14 years. It's hard to believe.
God is good. Yes.
You're going to see a video at the end of the service here. We're going to share that with you that gives you a little bit of the history of the church, because many of you, most of you, were not here when the church was established. But you'll be able to get a glimpse of the history of our church and see what God has done and how He has moved to bring us to this point in our history. But I asked to preach today because I felt like that I wanted to bring a word to you about having the right attitude in worship. I think that one of the things that we do as a church, gathered, primary purpose of the church gathered is one of two things. First of all, it's to disciple, to train, to be trained and equipped, so that then when we become the church scattered, you can go out and do what God has taught you to do, and told you to do through His Word and through the teachings of His Word. But the other reason that we gather, and the primary reason we gather as a church together, is to worship God and to lift up the name of Jesus. And we know that God's Word says that where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, that He is there in the midst of them. And so we gather together to meet with God every Sunday. We gather together not to visit with our friends, to check up on the latest gossip and who said what and who did what, and look at what she's wearing and look at what he's wearing, and you wouldn't believe what somebody told me. That's not why we gather here. We gather here to give glory and honor to God. 2 Chronicles 6 and verse 9 is our verse for this message. And it says this: for the eyes of the Lord run to and fro throughout the whole earth, to give strong support to those whose heart is blameless toward Him. Listen, God is looking for people who are true worshipers. People whose heart is blameless toward Him. I don't know about you, but I want to have a proper attitude when I worship God. Am I not on? Okay, sorry. Shot away here. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me in the back row? Were you having trouble hearing me before? Probably not. I got a good voice. Oftentimes my wife will tell me when I'm in the house, say, put away your preacher voice. Talk like a regular person. So I have to be careful about that. But did you catch it? God wants people who are true worshipers, who are blameless toward Him. I want to have a proper attitude when I worship God. You see, God despises, I'm going to use that word, that's a strong word, but God despises fakes. God hates people who are going through the motions. He hates that because His word says, you worship me with your lips, but your heart is far from me. That we come here, and oftentimes we come and we don't have a desire to worship. We get up and we say, oh, we got to go to church today. I wish we didn't have to go. I wish we could stay home. You know what? If you feel that way, you should stay home. Because God doesn't want you here if you don't want to be here. He only wants people here who desire to worship Him, who have a heart to worship Him. He hates fakes. He's looking for true worshipers who will worship Him in spirit and in truth. Jesus said those very words to the woman at the well. The words that we read are taken from John 4 and verse 23. In his conversation with the woman who was there in the middle of the day to draw water, she was avoiding the crowd. She didn't want to talk to people. She thought she'd be there alone, but she found Jesus there, and He enters into a conversation with her, and then He gives her these words: the hour is coming, it is now here, when true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. For the Father is seeking such people to worship him. You see, up until that time, people went to the temple or went to the tabernacle or went to the synagogue, and they would gather and they would go through certain things over and over and over again. Certain things would be said, certain things would be sung, and it became routine, and it became so commonplace that they could literally go there, turn their brain off, and they could still go through the motions of worshiping God. But Jesus is saying, listen, those days are over. Those days are over. Now, a time has come and is now here, he says, when true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. He says, for the Father is seeking just those kind of people to worship him. So as we think about checking our attitude for worship, then I want us to look at about 6 or 7 things that I think are vital if we're going to have the right attitude for worship. The first one of these is thankfulness. Number 1 is thankfulness.
Yes.
I don't know about you, but I don't want to be taken for granted. You may feel the same way, you know. God certainly does not want to be taken for granted. You know, we live in a land that is plentiful, and even though you may personally not have a lot, you have more in your poverty than 80% of the people in the rest of the world have.
Yes.
People would look at you and say, you're so rich. In my visits to Uganda, I'm not a rich person. I'm an average person, middle class perhaps, in my status. But in Uganda, I'm a wealthy man. They see me, and when they see white people, they see green. They see money, because they think everybody in America is rich. And the truth is, compared to them, we really are rich, and we don't even realize how rich we are. And so often we take the very things that God has given us, the very lifestyle that we're able to live, the house that we live in, the car that we drive, the clothes that we wear, the food that we eat, and we don't even give God the time of day to say thank you for these things. And God could take them away from us and snatch it away from us in a second. None of us likes to be taken for granted, and God doesn't like it either. Over and over in the Bible, I read words like, give thanks to God, give thanks always, be thankful, thanks be to God, or with thanksgiving. Listen, having a grateful heart is huge in worship. When you come into God's house, you should be coming in to give him praise for what he has done for you and who he is in your life.
Yes.
When we realize the depths and the heights of his love and the great gift of his Son, Jesus Christ, how can we do anything but be thankful? We have so much in this country and in this place to be thankful for. Thankfulness needs to be part of our attitude towards worship. The second thing I see is honesty. Honesty. Listen, when I read through the Psalms, I'm sometimes shocked at how genuinely honest the psalmists were. They didn't pull any punches. When they're feeling low, they put it down on paper. They let you know. When they felt like the whole world was against them, they would write it down. I think honesty is important. Listen, we walk around here and we try to put on this facade, this face, like God can't see who we really are. And God can't know what we're really thinking. And we might fool everybody in the world, but God is never fooled by our facade. Because you see, he doesn't look at our outward appearance. He doesn't look at the things we say. He doesn't even look at the things that we do. He looks at our heart, and he looks for the motives of the heart. And I think that we need to be honest with God, and we need to be honest with each other. Listen, I can't tell you how many years sometimes people go to church, and then somebody will discover that something's happened to them, and they'll say, you know, I didn't even know they were going through that. Because we don't share what's going on in our lives with one another. We keep things to ourselves. But you know, God has told us that we're to share, we're to bear one another's burdens. Listen, I don't know if you've carried a heavy load, but it takes a lot less effort if you got more than one person to carry that load. And oftentimes we instead of letting that go and sharing it with a trusted brother or sister in Christ, we want to hold on to that, and it just gets heavier and heavier and stronger in our lives, and it just weighs us down. We need to be honest with each other. God is not surprised at all at the difficulties that we go through. He knows when we've been treated unfairly. He knows when we have been hurt. Nothing catches God by surprise. I told the 9 o'clock service today, that everything that happens in your life, if you're a Christian, everything that comes to you in your life comes to you only after it passes by God first. Yes. Every good thing that comes to you, it comes to you because God has blessed you with it. He has given approval to that for it to come into your life. But here, listen to this. Every negative thing that has happened to you as well has also passed by God. And you say, well, how could God cause that to happen in my life? How could God allow something so terrible as what I went through to happen in my life? But listen, God knows the final results. God sees the big picture. Listen, God doesn't live in time and space like you and I do. God created time and space. And if He created it, that means that He exists outside of it. And if He exists outside of it, that means your life, which is on a timeline that started somewhere over here and is going to end somewhere over here, God can stand back and He can look and He can see that entire timeline, start to finish, and He can go even further that way to before the beginning of time, and He can go that way even after the end of time, and He can see it all at the same time. And the only person that in the entire universe that can know your future is God. Yes. And because He knows your future, then He has a plan. You don't even know the plan that God has for you. Yes. But God has a plan for your life. And yes, it might require you to go through some rough times. I'm reminded of a story. I used to fly helicopters for a living. And one of the things that's cool about being in a helicopter or in an airplane is that when you're up in the air, you can see a lot further down the road than if you're driving in a car on the road. And so think of this as a scenario that there is a car driving on a road and they're in communication with an aircraft that's way up in the air, okay? And they're taking their directions from the aircraft that's in the air. And they're on this 4-lane highway and they're making good time to their destination. And then the person in the helicopter calls them on the radio and says, hey, at the next exit, you need to get off. And the guy looks at his navigation that's on his phone or wherever he's got it, his navigation thing, and he says, that's not the right route. But he's taking his cues from the guy in the helicopter, and the guy in the helicopter says, get off at the exit. So he gets off at the exit. Then the guy says, now turn right. Now turn left down that little dirt, rutted road. And he gets down the road, and he's thinking, why are you sending me down this way? This old beat-up road is going to tear up my car. God, why are you putting me through this? This is crazy. And so but the guy in the helicopter says, trust me, I know what I'm doing. And so you continue down that road, and you come to this little 1-lane wooden bridge across this giant river. And you even think to yourself, should I even go across the bridge? But the guy in the helicopter says, okay, go on across, you'll be okay. And then you get across to the other side, and the guy says, now turn left and get back up on the interstate and keep going. And you say, why did you put me down that old rutted dirt road with that old rickety wooden bridge? And he said, because the 4-lane highway bridge was out, and if you'd have kept going, you would have ended in death. I took you on this hard path because it was the safest way to get around the tragedy that was going to befall you. You don't even know what God has kept you from. And the things that we go through oftentimes are the things that God is giving us instead of the really bad stuff that could happen to us if we weren't listening to God. So we need to understand that no matter what happens to us, God is in control and He knows what He's doing, and we don't ever need to second guess God, because God is God and I am not, and neither are you. Hallelujah. So we need to be honest with God. We need to be honest with God about how we feel. Nothing catches God by surprise. You've heard me say it. I'll say it again. The words that God has never uttered is, boy, I didn't see that one coming. God never says those words because He already knows your life from start to finish. He knows everything about you. He created you. Every fiber of your being He's aware of. So you need to be honest with God and with each other. Number 3 is reverence. I believe that we sometimes in our need for informality, we forget who God is. Hebrews 12:28 tells us this. Therefore, let us be grateful for receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken. And thus let us offer to God acceptable worship with reverence and awe. Those last words, reverence and awe, are words that we have forgotten in the modern day church, I'm afraid. We so often think of God as our buddy, our pal, our friend, and yet we realize that God is the one who created everything that exists. Yes, sir. Now I want you to bear with me here. Give me a little latitude. 14 years. So I think I could take some, I have some license here, so bear with me. Think of this earth as a golf ball. I should have brought one. I don't play golf, so I'd have to go buy one. But anyway, think of the earth as a golf ball, okay? Now, when you would hold up the golf ball, you might try to find where you are on that little tiny golf ball there, okay? Now, think about this. The sun, who is the planet that heats our land and keeps our temperature regulated, okay, compared to the size of Earth, is huge. You can, if you were to take a golf ball and another golf ball, and take enough golf balls to fill up a big yellow bus, school bus, that would be the sun compared to the Earth. That's how many Earths will fit inside of the sun. And the sun is more than 50 million miles away from us, and if we got 3 miles closer, we'd be burning up. And if we got 3 miles further away, we'd be freezing to death. The earth is exactly where it needs to be in relation to the sun, but the earth is small compared to the ginormous shape and size of the sun. Ginormous is not a word, I know. Just skip over that, okay? But you know what? The sun is just one star in a galaxy of billions and billions and billions of stars that make up the Milky Way, which is just one galaxy compared to the thousands and millions of galaxies that are out there. Science hasn't even begun to reach and touch the length and breadth of all the galaxies that exist and all the suns that exist. Every star that's in the sky that you see twinkling at night is a big fireball of a sun, just like our sun, only it's too far away to have that kind of effect on us. So we see it as a little tiny twinkling star. And God is bigger than that. And yet we want to call God buddy, old pal of mine. We need to have a little bit of reverence and awe for who God is. Now listen, God wants to be your friend, okay? He wants to be your friend. He loves you, and He cares about you. And it almost, it's like mind blown when I think about a God who's so big that He can create a sun that would fit a busload full of Earths, and there's thousands and millions of those, billions of those out there, and He's bigger than that, and yet He cares about you, and He cares about me personally. I can't even get my mind around that. And yet I know that that's what God's Word tells us. So we need to show reverence to God. I believe that if you really understand who God is, reverence and awe will naturally be a part of your worship attitude. The next thing I see is the word faith. The word faith. Hebrews 11:6 reminds us, without faith, it's impossible to please Him. For whoever would draw near to Him, near to God, must believe that He exists, and that He rewards those who seek Him. Listen, we got to have faith. I want my worship to be pleasing to God. And when I lift up my hands in worship, I need to have faith that God is who He says He is, that God is there and that He's listening. It's an awesome thing when we can sense the presence of God during worship. Even though God exists in such a way that He is huge and cannot fit into this room in any way, shape, or form, yet we can sense His presence here when we're worshiping. I believe that we need to realize that it takes faith to even get our minds around that. You know, faith is the absence of things hoped for. Things that we cannot see, we have to put our faith in. And you say, well, wait a minute. If I can't see it, I don't want to put my faith in it. Oh, really? 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 Okay? Everybody do this. What'd you see? You didn't see anything, did you? So it must not have been in the air there, huh? Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean that it isn't real. God is real, and just because we can't see God, we can't reach out and touch God, we can sense the presence of God, and He can be here. The Spirit of God, the very presence of God is here in this place. Every time where 2 or 3 are gathered, the Bible says He is there. He is there in the midst of them. And so I think we need to have the kind of faith that says, God, I believe you when you say that if we gather together in corporate worship, that you're going to be there and we'll be able to sense your presence during the worship. Faith is an important part of the right attitude for worship. Number 5 is humility. James 4:6 states this, God opposes the proud, but shows favor to the humble. Listen, I want to die to my pride And I want my self-worth from my relationship with God. I want to get that. God is the source of all the good things in my life. And knowing who God is and that He has given you all that you have keeps you on the right road to have a correct and humble attitude in your worship. Listen, we sometimes want to puff out our chest and be proud in front of God. But the Bible is clear to say that pride goeth before the fall. And we need to approach God in humility. Listen, the ground at the foot of the cross is level. There is nobody that stands taller than anyone else at the foot of the cross. All of us are sinners. And if you're a Christian, you've been saved by grace through faith in Jesus Christ. And it's not of your works, not of anything that you've done, so that you don't have any room to boast. But it is a gift of God, and you need to be humble when you approach Him in your worship. Yes. Number 6 is joy. Joy. Psalm 100. Verses 2 to 3 tells us, serve the Lord with gladness. Come into His presence with singing. Know that the Lord, He is God. It is He who made us, and we are His. We are His people and the sheep of His pasture. I'm glad that the psalmist added that last part. We are the sheep of His pasture. You know why? Because we need to identify with the sheep of God's pasture. And you know what's interesting about sheep? They are dumb. They are dumb animals. And the reason that they travel in flocks and the reason that they have a shepherd to protect them is because if you were to remove the shepherd and the sheepdog from the flock, within a few hours or a few days, the entire flock would be decimated. Wild animals would come and get them. They'd drown. They would fall off a cliff because they're stupid. And brothers and sisters, you and I need God. We need God, and so we need to experience the joy of our salvation to know that because we can't do it by ourselves, God is there for us. He will never leave us. He will never forsake us. Listen, the Apostle Paul understood this. Writing to the church at Philippi, in chapter 4 of the book of Philippians, he said, rejoice in the Lord in every circumstance. You say, now wait a minute, Pastor. You mean when life is throwing me curveballs and things aren't going so great, I'm supposed to give thanks to God for that? That's what the Bible says. Rejoice in every circumstance. Rejoice in the Lord always. Always means at all times, at all places, in all ways and circumstances. And he says, oh, and if you didn't get it, let me say it again. Rejoice. And then he says these words in Philippians chapter 4. He says, I've learned the secret of contentment. Contentment comes from having joy that's welling up inside of you. He said, I've learned the secret of contentment, whether I'm well fed or whether I'm going hungry, whether I'm living in plenty or whether I'm living in want. He said, I can do all things through Christ who gives me the strength. He acknowledged that even in the midst of his difficult circumstances, and brothers and sisters, Paul was in dire straits when he wrote those words. He was in prison in Rome, chained to a Roman guard, awaiting a death sentence that was sure to come. And yet he writes as if someone who is living free and living life to its fullest. And you know what? He was. Even though he was in jail, even though he was under house arrest, he still was living life to the fullest. He understood that joy is not dependent, listen to me, joy is not dependent upon your circumstances. Your circumstances don't have to be a certain way for you to have joy. Just like God is external of time, joy is external of circumstances. The joy of the Lord comes because of a right relationship with God through Jesus Christ. And no matter what's going on in your life, you can have joy, and you can display this joy, and you can experience this joy, and the joy of your salvation can keep you going even in the most difficult of circumstances. Amen. Joy is what we need to have as we gather together to worship God. Number 7, the last one, we need to worship God with our whole heart. With our whole heart. Our theme verse for this year is Luke 10:27, and it says, Jesus tells us, love him with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. Listen, I don't know about you, but I don't want to go a day without expressing to God the love that I have for him. We're supposed to love him with our whole heart. And listen, we love him because we need to have an attitude of gratitude for what he's done for us. The love that we have is the love that He's given to us. We can't even love ourselves or love each other without the love of Christ in us. I don't want to go through life without passion, without love. I want to be someone who puts my whole heart and being into what I'm doing. Listen, God wants our worship and our love for Him to be with our whole heart. As a lover of God, I think it's a sham to just go through the motions in our worship. God deserves so much more. God deserves so much more than that. Amen? So today, I challenge you to check your attitude for worship, because I believe that God is calling us to a higher place. God is calling us to a higher standard in worship. And we need to be free, and we need to be honest, and we need to be joyful, and we need to be humble, and we need to serve Him with our whole heart. That's my prayer for you today. In Jesus' name.
With one voice